The beginning of the 20th century marked a transformative moment in African American history. Although segregation against them existed, African Americans withstood the harsh consequences of being Black because of the economic opportunities present in the United States. America was a segregated society, and African Americans were considered second-class citizens. They viewed the counterpoint as an opportunity to prove their loyalty, patriotism, and worthiness for equal treatment in the United States.
Even African American soldiers fighting for America were discriminated against. Although they were considered soldiers, most of the work they did was labor-intensive, similar to slave work. Due to the fact that America was at war, the jobs that white folk used to employ opened, and African Americans jumped on the opportunity to make more money. Up north, the jobs were plentiful and salary was generous compared to the income African Americans were used to. Partly because of the discrimination they had experienced in the South and the greater job opportunities, African Americans relocated northward in a journey known as the Great Migration. Racism, while still a serious obstacle, was considered much less brutal there than in the South. African American men received the right to vote and better educational opportunities. Chicago and New York were popular destinations for African American travelers. The decade between 1910 and 1920 saw the Black population of major northern cities grow by large percentages. In New York, the Black population grew by 66%, in Chicago by 148%, in Philadelphia by 500%, and in Detroit by 611%. By the end of 1919, millions of Blacks had left the South, usually traveling by train, boat, or bus.
As World War I came to an end, white soldiers returned to their hometowns expecting to continue their jobs prior to the war, only to notice that they had been given up to African Americans. As whites felt inferior to the employed African Americans, race riots broke out. The summer of 1919 began the greatest period of interracial strife to the U.S. history, including a distribution wave of race riots. The most serious race riot took place in Chicago in July of 1919 due to the violation of Chicago's beach laws by a young African American teenager. The riot lasted for 7 days and left 38 people dead, over 500 injured, and 1,000 Black families lost their homes when they got torched by the rioters.
The early 1900s was transformative for African Americans past, present, and future because they withstood the discrimination by whites while continuing to improve their lives. It is hard to beat a person who never gives up. Babe Ruth.
On the night of May 14, 1918, Privates Henry Johnson and Needham Roberts were standing watch when a grenade landed in their trench. Private Needham was badly wounded and Henry Johnson was left to face a German patrol on his own. One of the unit's white officers, Major Arthur Little, would later tell his story.
The little soldier from Albany came down like a wildcat upon the shoulders of the German. As Johnson sprang, he unsheathed his bolo knife, and as his knife landed upon the shoulders of that ill-fated Boche, the blade of the knife was buried to the hilt through the crown of the German's head. Major Arthur Little, 369th Infantry Division.
In fierce hand-to-hand combat, the former red-cap porter of the New York Central Railroad single-handedly wounded or killed 24 enemy soldiers. Back in America, the story was front-page news. The press called the incident the Battle of Henry Johnson.
Having shot one of his foe down and clubbed another with the butt of his rifle, he sprang to the aid of Roberts with his bolo knife. As the enemy fell into disorderly retreat, Johnson, 3 times wounded, sank to the ground, seized a grenade alongside his prostrate body, and literally blew one of the fleeing Germans to fragments. Martin Green, The New York Evening World.
2 days later, the men were presented with the French Medal of Honor, the Croix de Guerre. They were the first American soldiers, black or white, to be so honored in World War I. When asked about the event, Henry Johnson said,
"There isn't so much to tell. Just fought for my life. A rabbit would have done that. Private Henry Johnson."